That's a really, really lovely introduction, and one that I'm used to. You know, people talk about me and my war reporting and being a foreign correspondent. Tonight, though, I want to talk about some more parts of my personal life that I don't talk about quite so much. I want to let you in on a little bit of my life over the last few years as I've sort of sought to try to change it a little bit from some of the traditional things and things that are in my book. Now, as 2019 came to a close and wound down, I started packing up my old apartment in Beirut. And I had, for quite a long time, harbored dreams of moving to New York City. And it's not something I'd really talk to a lot of people about. It's not a big, you know, having a sort of fantasy of a Sex and the City lifestyle in New York City, as many of us millennial kids who were teenagers in the late 90s and early noughties kind of quietly have always had. It's not something I really discussed a lot with my fellow war reporters. I had lived in Dubai, Kabul, Sana'a, and eventually Beirut. I'd really come of age on the road, you know, living and working in conflict zones, doing the kind of work that I absolutely loved. But now was the time for a new city, a new life, really. A new me was how I pictured it. It's kind of embarrassing to admit to having this sort of kind of childish Sex and the City idea of what life in New York would be like. I'm not sure if people ever watched that show or grew up watching it, but there was a lead character, Carrie Bradshaw, who used to always opine, and I couldn't help but wonder. And so there was a little part of me that couldn't help but wonder sometimes in hotel rooms in Yemen or, you know, in trenches in Afghanistan, if, you know, maybe something had gone wrong in my life, you know? Like maybe there'd been a sort of sliding doors moment where I was actually not meant to be a war reporter. I was meant to be like a Vogue columnist, you know? And I was a sort of, you know, shoe shopping, salad eating, New York party girl, but there'd been some sort of dimensional shift mistake, and I'd ended up standing here in a flak jacket in Afghanistan. So I decided I would just go for it, and I'd move here, and I decided, well, I would start off, at least this new adventure, teaching at Princeton for the fall semester in 2020. Not exactly Sex and the City, you know, but more Dead Poet Society, but, you know, close enough. I figured it would be a nice, leafy start to my life, a new start. I would get, you know, sort of an antique bicycle, and I'd write the great American novel under a tree, and, you know, I would really just enjoy it while I could. Cut to reality, and COVID happens, and you find me in a tiny, cramped apartment in a place aptly called Hell's Kitchen, teaching my Princeton students from my laptop. Trapped in an apartment with my husband, who I'd moved over with, he was an American moving back, both of us having decided we're going to get a divorce, but having to share this apartment because we are stuck in real estate hell, and deciding to power through until the end of our rental contract. So both of us in there together in our $5,000 a month jail cell, except for me on the couch. I'm on the couch of shame. The divorcer has to sleep on the couch. So I called it the divorce couch for quite some time. So it was a bit of a rough start to my glamorous new life in New York, but not to worry. After the humiliation of asking the security guards at New York City Hall entrance, you know, where to for divorces, please, they pointed me down the hall, and I joined the long line of New Yorkers shuffling down these dusty hallways, holding their printed out paperwork from the internet, waiting to get the legal status of their COVID breakups. Being good New Yorkers and avoiding eye contact with one another. But my luck did pick up. I managed to find someone in New York City, in Manhattan, who was willing to rent an apartment to a self-employed former war reporter. Not very easy to do. I got this old loft, like ancient loft that hadn't been touched in 50 years. It had like cracks in the wall I could fit my fingers in. One of the windows at one stage actually just decided to fall in. It just gave up and fell in. And it even had one of those freestanding bathtubs in the corner with the little curtain, round curtain above it. So I was actually living in a 90s sitcom, which was closer to the original dream. So I was, it was definitely, looking up. And I pulled my desk over underneath the window, and I opened my laptop, and of course I typed, I couldn't help but wonder, and started writing my book. Next up, like any recently singled millennial woman in New York City, it was time for egg freezing. The ultimate, we all know, any women my age have been having these conversations endlessly. We all know that is the ultimate power move for young women today when they find themselves divorced and 38. So I marched off to the brightest and best, we'll call her Dr. Harvard, and one of the best clinics in New York City. Dr. Harvard was not terribly impressed with my war stories, and less impressed than ever that at the ancient, decrepit age of 38, I would even try to preserve anything as old and dusty and archaic as my own fertility. I think a lifetime of overachieving and a habit of dating much older men had given me a false sense of eternal youth, which was actually very much so mistaken. And she was very keen to correct that. So rather crestfallen, I just, swiped my credit card and sat down in a room filled with other elder millennials, as is best to call ourselves. Clearly, this was one deadline that I had just pushed and pushed and pushed until I could no longer. I looked around the room at all of us and recognized how much we had in common after having thought of myself as so special and interesting and different. Here we were, elder millennials sandwiched between the Gen Zers, optimistic and really much more interested in their social impact and their carbon footprint than babies. And of course, the Gen Xers, who were, casually enjoying their life of home-owning comfort and, solid employment and low interest rates. But us millennials, we elder millennials, we graduated out of college and forged forward with our careers and fell on our faces into a massive financial crisis. But we still hustled and worked our asses off until one day we looked in the mirror and saw that one shitty fucking gray hair. And we were made aware that, the clock was ticking. It didn't care that we were trying to build careers in the biggest financial crisis since 1929. Our bodies were calling time on us like a pissed off, exhausted barmaid. So naturally, I did what everybody else would do in this situation. I quickly checked for gray pubes. Just another indignity. We've all done it, really, but luckily none found, so I was able to move on to the next stage of my new life. And surely, I couldn't help but wonder, the next stage would be dating, and that would in some way reflect this glamorous new life in New York. So, dating had changed quite a bit since I was last single. It's now online. I signed up for the dating apps and hoped no one knew who I was, and answered a few awkward questions about whether or not I'm an adrenaline junkie. There's a fair bit of viewing me as a bit of a novelty item. At one stage, I did Google, what is sexting? There's a lot I had to catch up on after all those years in the Middle East, just, studying Arabic. Eventually, I was very, very lucky. And I did find, forgive me for saying this, but my Mr. Big, It's at the bar, actually. So very, very, very happy to say. But that's not the end of the story. So it's important that that isn't the end of the story, because this isn't a fairy tale. This is life in New York City. Cut to spring of last year. I am wedding dress shopping in Bergdorf. Finally. Thank you. I am finally living this fantasy dream life. I'm there with my friend. We get a glass of wine after a long day of putting on dresses, and we go to the bar there. I have a glass of wine. At this point, I'm thinking, like, I am Carrie Bradshaw. I pulled this off. And so, of course, I float off to 59th Street subway station, so not so Sex in the City, but I got to get home. And I hop on the train, and I'm headed south, and I'm doing what everybody else is doing. I'm just standing there, staring at my phone, and someone rushes through the train car and smacks me, punches me on the side of the face, like right here on the temple. Boom! I have 15 years of war reporting under my belt. I have crawled on my belly in firefights in Mogadishu. I have been smuggled into rebel-held areas of Syria and Yemen. I have been targeted by some of the most diabolical regimes in the world and spent a lot of time with warlords. It wasn't until I was on the number 4 train heading south in Manhattan in the middle of the afternoon that I finally come to blows with anybody. Everybody screamed and ran to the other side of the car. The woman standing next to me burst into tears. And I would crouch down on the ground, like holding my face, like wondering what on earth just happened. It was pretty mortifying and pretty humbling as someone with a self-identity, despite this sort of secret attempt to build a new life, as pretty tough. Obviously, whenever I told my fellow war reporters and they realized that I was absolutely fine, they laughed their asses off at this. Now, they say you're not a true New Yorker, this is what I've heard, until you've lived here for 10 years. But I think, to be fair, I couldn't help but wonder, if one has been punched in the face on the subway, you know. People ask me about risk and danger all the time. You know, the reality is that this new life, I like to call it my life in captivity, it has been one of one risk after another, you know, getting a divorce, getting married again, starting a business, standing up here in front of you guys telling you all of this. And, you know, the reality is that some of the most important and meaningful moments in my life have involved risk. Of course, I haven't really reinvented my life entirely. Once a foreign correspondent, always a foreign correspondent in many ways. And in New York, this new, sometimes wilder life is a new and even wilder beat. So thank you very much. And I've got a divorce couch I'm giving away. If you need one, just see me after.